Well, hello again. My name's Andy, and thank you for just taking a few moments as I share with you a short story again from this little book that I keep advertising. It's written by Dorothy Carswell, and it's published by 10 of Those, and it's entitled Real Lives. And it's free to you, of course, if you would like a copy for yourself. There'll be some details at the end of the video. Well, this week's story is about a lady called Jane Scales. And her chapter begins with Jane as a middle-aged, sophisticated lady sitting down around a table with lots of her friends in order that they might have another game of bridge. But this would actually be the last game of bridge that she would ever have with them. Jane tells us in her story that she grew up on a farm in the land of Kenya, and life was good. But it took a turn for the worse whenever she was 6 years of age, whenever her mum died. And then shortly after that, World War II broke out, and her dad joined the army, and so he shipped Jane and her other sister off to England, where they would stay at a Catholic boarding school. After the Second World War, Jane's dad remarried, and the family moved to various places and lived in various places in the United Kingdom. They even went back to Kenya for a while, but that didn't last, and eventually they relocated back home then to the United Kingdom. But life in this new family, Jane says, it wasn't easy. There were stresses and strains, and eventually, as a young woman, Jane had a nervous breakdown. If you'd have known her looking on, everything looked absolutely fine. She had all that she needed, but Jane speaks about inside being desperately unhappy and having a really low sense of self-esteem and worth. And at this particular time then, she says that she received an offer for marriage, and she accepted this offer because she felt, well, it might help bring some happiness into my life and so on, and things would move forward and be better. But it wasn't all that she had hoped it would be, and so eventually she and her husband divorced from one another. She very quickly married again, but after a few years this marriage went the same way, and sadly once again she was divorced from her husband. But this time she was left with 3 children. She had 2 girls and a boy. And she speaks about being terribly unhappy, but for their sake she carried on in her day-to-day life. She cried out to God often, she says, for help. She read psychology books to see if she could find help. She even visited fortune tellers to see if they could help. But it would appear at this stage in her life, she says, she just could not find help anywhere. But not long after that, one day when she was at work, she worked as a teacher in a school. She went into a communal room, and there she saw a book sitting on a table. It was a book that was written by a lady called Joni Eareckson, a Christian lady. And in this book, Joni tells her story of how, as a young girl, she suffered a terrible accident at a swimming pool, and this left her with a lifelong disability. She was a paraplegic, and yet she speaks about how God used this tragedy to help her find him. And Jane was struck by this. Not long after this then, she read an article in the Reader's Digest magazine concerning a lady called Betty ten Boom, a Dutch Christian lady who was sent to the concentration camps during the Second World War. And there in that camp, she told people about Jesus. She tried to live for Jesus and love those around her. And eventually she died because she was a disciple of Jesus. And Jane speaks about being truly impacted by this story. Shortly after this, she was listening to a tape one day about the crucifixion. So let me read what she says about this time. She says, listening to that tape gave me a sense of my own wrongdoing, being responsible for Christ's death. I realized all that the Lord had done for me. All my sins had been laid on the cross. He paid the punishment for them in my place, so that I might be forgiven. By then I was in tears. God was real. and he had done a wonderful thing in my life. I was so thankful. Jane speaks here of experiencing God's life transforming power. She speaks about God doing a radical thing in her life, regenerating her life from a careless, unbelieving, dissatisfied one into a life full of peace and security and eternal hope. So, can I ask you, how has life been for you? Has it been full of privilege and yet devoid of peace? Has it been full of difficulty and so bereft of hope? Or has your life been full of guilt and yet lacking in that forgiveness that you so desperately want? Well, the Bible teaches us that Christ died for the ungodly to bring us to God, to bring us, like Jane Scales, into a new life, into a new experience of peace and security and eternal hope. I wonder, would you think about that and come to Christ?